Right. And what you've just been watching is a recording by Paul Admochiri of Good Evening Ghana at the Democracy Hub, conversation that was held at the British Council in the course of the week. It's a program organized by the Democracy Hub, and they insist that rather than tinkering with the Constitution bit by bit, we should simply overhaul it, a complete new constitution. They call it New Constitution for a New Generation. Is a better way to do it. So let's begin the conversation from there, because the man who delivered the keynote address at that function is here, Oliver Barker-Vormawor. So what's the point? That what President Mahama has inaugurated, seeking to do, will not achieve the results we need?
I want to commend the committee that has been put up by the president. In particular, a number of individuals there, and Professor Kwesi Prempeh, whose progressive leanings nobody can doubt, and his views on constitutional reform in this country. I think that one of the things that we sought to do, and we call it the case for a new constitution at the event, was to push people's imagination beyond some of what we've seen within the conversations that has happened. Now, we admit willingly and immediately that the constituency around a new constitution idea is perhaps the smallest constituency that exists in this debate. But we think that our governance can be improved by testing ideas and testing the limits of what ought to be done. And we said that in the context of, we gave two main propositions why, for all the things that we're trying to achieve, a new constitution is perhaps the better framework and perhaps a simpler approach. In particular, we laid out our concerns about the process of how this will take place. And we talked about the process particularly in light of why it has not been possible to achieve constitutional reform over the years until this day. In particular, constitutional reform that reflects the aspirations of so many Ghanaians and key ideas. We think that a new process is still going to face those challenges. One, about how we do the amendments themselves. The highest number of amendments I think we've done to the Constitution is 10 at a time in 1996 when the Accra-Rawlings issue happened. But the range of amendments that have been suggested, if you take the Constitution Review Commission's reports, there's over 229 provisions, I think, that affect the Constitution recommendations that they made. And then there were in total 473 that concerned, other administrative and legislative changes that have to happen broadly. The range of amendments that are being talked about are a lot. But beyond that as well, several of those provisions touch entrenched provisions. And there are some suggestions, some have suggested that is almost undemocratic to bundle up so many constitutional amendment questions and suggest that to referendum and ask Ghanaians to vote yes or no. So that's a process question that needs to be dealt with. There's also the question about the role of Parliament in the process, whether or not Parliament can tinker and change things within the Constitutional Amendment Bill. There are people outside of Parliament that hold the view that they can't, but Parliament itself holds the view that they can change things within it. It's unclear as to what effects the Council of State's views are to have on the amendment bill itself, whether the bill which is gazetted must be taken as it is wholesale without any changes to it. All those questions make the process more difficult and uncertain. Now, some of the key ideas driving the process now is about, for instance, like we talked about whether the president should continue to appoint ministers from within Parliament. Something that we know from history that Parliament is completely averse to. And even though there's a rising crescendo of voices who are calling for this, it must go through Parliament. And is Parliament going to look on for that to happen? That's the question we're going to see as the days unfold.
You suspect they will not agree?
I suspect that this is not going to happen. If they don't agree, then what is more likely to happen is that they're going to filibuster the process. So those are things that we need to avert our minds to. And we're saying that one of the ways in which you circumvent...
And filibuster means they will delay it.
They will delay it in perpetuity. Because unlike, for instance, the Article 106, which has clear timelines, well, after it leaves Parliament, this doesn't have that at Chapter 25. So you can stay for quite a long time in many ways. And then we have also talked about, so one of the ways in which you get around a lot of that process is to take all these recommendations, change the changes that you want to, and then present a holistic document to the people who have the sovereignty to make that decision. Now, I am not disputing that there are certain people who also hold the view that no, that is impossible with the current constitution we have. But we don't accept that as a democratic view anywhere in the world. If the Kenya, if taking Barbados, the people can come up at any time and propose for themselves a new constitution.
Yes, Professor Bochi holds that view.
Yes,
you cannot change.
That you cannot change it.
The constitution because of Article 3 that says that the constitution, if it's overthrown, whatever it is. But my suggestion to him is that in that provision, it says. It talks about violent overthrow of the constitution.
Absolutely.
It doesn't talk about the people themselves agreeing that we want a new constitution and they cannot have it.
Absolutely. He and I have debated that view before. I mean, we talked about it and I've hinted at the fact that the constitution's focus is violent or other unlawful means, which presumably means that non-violent and lawful means can enable this to happen. But that view continues to persist among some at least. Then we've talked about the content itself. That when you take the Constitution, Chapter 25 divides the Constitution, as you know, into unentrenched and unentrenched, and you make changes, you amend these ones. How do you incorporate a new provision, for instance? So if there's a new idea, fresh idea that exists within the body of the Constitution, are you going to tag it to some existing provision within the Constitution? There's no mechanism for introducing new ideas. That is the defect we are talking about. That it doesn't allow you to read what problem are we trying to solve. And if the extent of that problem requires new ideas, this constitution closes the door to that. And we've talked about, so that's one of the things that we want everybody to think about. And I know that just suggesting new is, there's always the question, but we can always amend, We have said that the most pragmatic way for Ghanaians who are interested in constitution review amendment is not to be so attached to the date of the document, but what justice the document can enable us to do. In short words, without having to, I suppose, recanvass the positions that were made on that day. But yeah, I think that's the convention we're inviting in any respect.
And there are salient parts of the Constitution that attract your attention as the Democracy Hub.
Yes,
share those with us.
We set forth 16 grand ideas for constitution remaking. Our first priority is what we call the Popular Initiative. And the Popular Initiative, we're looking at examples from other countries as well, where Ghanaians have the opportunity and chance to be involved in constitution reform and amendments going into the future. And what this means is that the constitution can set a threshold and said, if you gather a signature of, say, 10% of eligible voters, or 1 million Ghanaians sign a petition, the question can be put to referendum, whether or not the constitution should be amended in the way in which Ghanaians are calling for.
If you can take us through a list of that, instead of explaining your 16 grand ideas.
So that one. The second one we talked about was proportional representation, for instance, which changes the nature of parliament. The third idea we talked about was about the environment and our constitution's relationship to the environment and preparing us for some of the ecological challenges that are coming up and that we have to revise the framework for that. We talked about people's right to natural resources. We are demanding that all natural resources that are exploited, that there should be a 25% community participation in every lease that is granted as a way in which we ensure social justice. We talked about decentralization in terms of how we decentralize. We shouldn't only focus on we shouldn't only focus on political decentralization by voting for DCs who have no money to operate, but that 40% of resources should be committed to local development. All development is local, after all. Which number am I on? We talked also about
separation of powers,
the separation of powers,
executive encroachment.
So we talked about the judiciary and reforming the judiciary. That the conversation should not be narrowed down to whether or not we cap the Supreme Court, but there has to be broader reforms on how to make it much more independent. For instance, better empowering the Judicial Council and reforming the Judicial Council in particular.
Abolishing the Council of State.
The abolishment of the Council of State is one we have called for. We think if we can go ahead and forget them and make appointments clearly, nobody even remembers that they exist. We've talked about
president must pay tax.
The need for the president.
Almost everybody agrees with you
the president
on that.
must pay tax. We've talked about the need for the indemnity provisions of the Constitution should be removed. Our point is that the Constitution cannot preach justice and then entrench impunity. We've called also for the fact that the president cannot be prosecuted after 3 years from leaving office.
If you can end on what you mean by end of wage apartheid.
So we've talked about the wage apartheid. And the wage apartheid, as we understand this, is the Article 71 framework, which allows certain individuals of Ghanaians to be within a particular class where they have, irrespective of whether the country is performing badly economically or whatever the situation may be, they're able to enhance for themselves allowances from periodically. And persons who serve the civil service in the public sectors across the length and breadth of this country do not have the same wage protections. That everybody must be put on single spine.
Okay.
Everybody must be on the national social security system as well. This is what ensures justice.
I'm laughing before I get to Ines Hussaini. Everybody must be on social security.
Yes,
everybody must be on single spine. Will it work? Will the elite who will control this process allow for such a thing to be done?
Me?
Yes.
Oh yes, I think that basically I share in the views of Oliver, except that our experiences as a country do not seem to support the call for a new constitution. Our constitutions have been tied to events. And this one is coming out from a movement of the people, particularly the youth, looking at how to bring a constitution that reflects their aspirations and that meets their expectations. So that is the challenge. Because apart from the first constitution, there was the order in council.
Yeah.
When we became a republic, we did a republican constitution. Okay? Then when we became independent, the 1960 constitution, and that was a republic, actually. We had the first republican constitution. When that republican constitution was overthrown, we went to a second republic. So there was no constitution. So we went to a second republic. Okay? And then a third republic. And now a fourth republic. But what he's advocating is not a republican event. It's not, the cutting of a rupture. Okay? He's saying that it's coming from a collection of the views and aspirations of the people to reflect what they desire.
And nothing stops that.
And nothing stops that. It has happened elsewhere. Elsewhere, the parliament has been converted into a constituent assembly to do that. It has happened somewhere. But that's why he said it's a limited constitution, a small constituency that seems to be supporting that. Because you need to understand that parliament can do that. We can constitute parliament to do that. But whether that parliament, changing parliament into a constituent assembly to do that will meet their legitimate aspirations. Because they are looking at a broad-based writing of the constitution. But I agree. It goes to show that Ghanaians think and believe that having practiced this constitution for close to 32 years, we need to tweak certain things. The Democracy Hub says, no, don't tweak. It's easier to just rewrite a constitution than tweaking it. Okay? So if you rewrite the constitution, you pass it. And that's a new constitution. Okay, so it's easier than to look at so many appointments, amendments in the constitution.
You have 41, CRC at least, suggested 41 entrenched clauses that had to be amended. And the argument is that you can't take all of them, bunch them together and say vote yes or no.
You cannot do that.
So you must do one by one. So the argument is that if you want to do this kind of amendment, it will take us a million years to finish amending the constitution, which will never happen. And then the non-entrenched clauses, you had identified how many? 56, 57 of them.
Yes. So Parliament can do that, unentrenched. Parliament can do that. And Parliament has done that before. He mentioned 10, which has also far been done. So that one can be done. And the Constitution says that Parliament can do that. Now, how is Parliament going to safeguard its own interests? Because they're going to do that. And that's the issue he's raising. If the bill is introduced into Parliament, will Parliament debate that bill Because that bill will be coming with an advice from the Council of State to pass it. Will Parliament have the authority to change what the Council of State has approved? Now, there is a school of thought who says that Parliament can do that because that is a bill. Okay? And there's another school of thought who says that no, but that's what the people say should be changed. How can Parliament change the bill to reflect what they want? And so there are many, but the good thing is that we're engaged in the conversation. And now I'm part of those who think that there's a case for a constitutional reform or constitutional review or a new constitution. There's a case for that.
You have been very committed to that.
There's a case to that because now, you see, even look at our history. Constitution 1992 came into being because we're transiting from a military rule to a democratic rule. So about 70% of this our constitution derives from the 1979 constitution. Okay, so they needed a document. Then they added our experience of 1979 in Article 78(1). And that is creating a problem for us. That's creating a problem because everybody goes to Parliament and thinks that you should become a minister. And then the very institution of Parliament that is supposed to protect our rights and also hold government accountable is now in bed with government. So we are not having accountability. We're not having it. And we can only have accountability if institutions of accountability hold those who spend our monies accountable. But because we're not having it, we have a deep sense of entitlement, number one, and number two, we have impunity. So how do we rectify that? That's the unintended consequence of the 1992 Constitution. Number two, you have an electoral commissioner who is appointed solely by the sitting president without recourse to Parliament or to the Public Services Commission. Meanwhile, he's a public servant. And then he faces credibility problems. Okay? How do we rectify that? And then he's given his conditions of service or her conditions of service in the case of our current electoral commission is tied to the Justice of the Court of Appeal. When does she retire? If she's a young person, okay, she goes up to 70. So young, you are staying the whole life as an electoral commissioner. Do we want that? Then you have the seeming conflict between Article 71 and Article 17. Article 17 says that there should not be discrimination. And Article 71 is discriminating among public officers on the basis that some people are more public, than others. So you see, so you have problems. And that's why we need to look at it. Then you have the asset declaration. Now, when you look at the Constitution, the list of persons who have been told to declare their assets appear to be woefully inadequate. Because many people come into public resources, and then the Constitution is silent on them.
Even that people have issues that, for example, President Mahama should ensure that his officers have declared their assets even before they go for the vetting or before he swears them in. The Constitution says you must declare your assets and liabilities before you assume office. Then we went ahead and passed the law that says you have a 6 months grace period to do that. Why?
So you have to look at it. And I'm sure President Mahama is listening.
The Chairman's Committee recommends a 3 months grace period rather than declare before you assume the office.
We should go for declare before you assume office. We should go for that. Because you see, you are looking to put corruption behind you. You're looking for evidence of impropriety that can be traced to the very day a person takes office. Okay? So if you give 3 months, what do you think the person will do within the 3 months? He knows he has a 3 months window. What do you I mean, we will spiral to the bottom. So, no. And I like the fact that people have drawn President Mahama's attention to the fact that his officers, his appointees must declare their assets before they assume office. And he set out values. He says the values that will define his government are transparency and accountability.
Right.
And this, I mean, the declaration of assets and the chairman of the committee says, no, we should not just declare and put them in envelopes.
Yeah, it should be verified by the Auditor General.
The example of the Senegalese, or is it Senegal or Sierra Leone, who said, look, this is, I have declared.
Publish it.
And publish it. So the one we publish. And then we should extend, because we don't want people hiding their assets in the names of their wives and children. Not so, a public say. And then we know. And then we want the Auditor General to verify.
That's right.
That's a new amendment, to verify the declaration. Because we don't want people to declare in anticipation of acquisition.
What's your view of this particular committee? And they have just 5 months to present their report. Professor H. Kwesi Prempeh is the chair. Justice Sophia Adinyira is a member. Professor Kwame Karikari is a member. Mrs. Charlotte Osei is a member. Dr. Godwin Jokoto is a member. He teaches law at the University of Ghana. Ibrahim Tanko Amidu is a member. He's with Star Ghana. Dr. Isi Ansan is a member. She teaches as a Shesi. I think she's still there. Dr. Reina Akumpergia is a secretary.
Yes, I think that there's diversity. I think that there's inclusiveness. And I think that is based on good faith. We have got 2 reports already existing, the Constitution Review Committee and the Constitution Review Consultative Committee. The President draws their attention to the existence of those documents and tells them to look at them, look at the gaps, and see what could be done about the gaps, and then come up with actionable steps to see how the Constitution, our 1992 Constitution, have been amended. Can be amended. I'm sure the Democracy Hub will engage them and argue whether we need a new Constitution or, we must look at certain provisions. But I think that like Kwesi Prempeh said, this is a good faith committee, and it's good also that the President, clearly we can see an intention to amend, that he's named the Constitution so early in the day. Let's give them timelines.
Many have said this is his opportunity of a legacy. The legacy he's seeking, this is an opportunity because he also has to test in Parliament.
And that's not lost on him. That's why he's quickly, even before swearing in his minister, the Attorney General, establishes a committee for that.
Right.
Okay? And then he knows that he has, if it is the amendments in Parliament, he has the numbers to do that. Okay? But he doesn't want it to look like he's fostering his views on the people. So he's gone for people who have challenged his view and his leadership style in the past to see whether we can have buy-in, inclusiveness, okay, and engender legitimacy by what he'll be doing.
Right. And as I mentioned some time ago to you, you would realize that Professor H. Kwesi Prempeh has actually been at this for a long time.
Yes.
The Constitution Review Commission's work, when Gloria Akufu,
yes,
the Attorney General, set up a committee to try and see how they could piecemeal implement some of the things, Professor H. Kwesi Prempeh had a role to play there.
He was the person who came up with the, with the
elections of the...
Not the DCE. The DCE was a good one. But he said, look, lumping everything together with one bill on the interim provisions,
right,
to overreach the rights of the citizens,
right,
to declare their stance on specific provisions.
That's right.
So I know, and he was a constitutional advisor to the former president. I know that.
Okay, and so people are excited about the character of the committee and the diverse nature of the committee. You don't have just throwing in some NDC people there to go and do work because you want to do this, but go to civil society, and people are really excited about this committee. Professor H. Kwesi Prempeh himself has issued a statement and says that he is excited about this committee, but this is a burden. It's a lot of sacrifice that they have to make, and they are supposed to make this within 5 months. How is that going to be possible, really?
You've established a platform. I don't know whether you're on that platform.
Yes, I'm on. Oliver is also on. Professor Jampo.
There's a tremendous debate on the platform.
Professor Jampo, Professor, former Speaker of Parliament. Yeah, all of them, a good number of them. Let's hope that good work will be done. Let me go to Sule. Sule, what do you see in this attempt to revise the Constitution? People have said it's only a question of political will. It's not really about that. We don't know that certain things have to be tweaked in the Constitution.
Samson, I think that, first of all, as Honorable Fuseni has said, the decision to have this committee very early on in the president's tenure is, for me, an indication of how serious he takes this. Many have also said that the real challenge with our development as a nation is the governance side of things, and not just the issue of elections, and then we have elected peacefully, and then we keep on going. The caliber of persons selected certainly, I think, is a reflection of how well intended the whole process is being thought about. I mean, as Professor Prempeh said, he is not known to be somebody who is an NDC member. We all know his views when it comes to the previous administration of John Mahama. And to have him as chair of the committee is a clear indication of an appreciation of his values and principles rather than his political affiliation. And for me, that is really great. And of course, all the other people that you mentioned, including my former best boss and mentor, Professor Kwame Kakari, Tanko, Isi Ansah, Justice Adinira. I think all these people are people that we can say are patriots, nationalists, and people who have committed themselves to serving the country. Now, when it comes to the process, I think what has been put forward so far is the question of whether we adopt the gradualist approach by doing the amendments as we go, or we do the overhauling, which is, look, let's abandon this and go for a new one, even if it would mean we are repeating some of the things that are in this one that we find to be good. Let us have a new constitution rather than the amendments. I tend to side with those who advocate for the gradualist approach in terms of identifying the provisions that we think are problematic and dealing with them, even if it's one at a time. And here I seem to side with President Akufo-Addo, who at one point during engagement with him at the Jubilee House on the issue of constitutional amendment said, look, we need to be very, very careful because this is the constitution that has carried us on for 3 decades. We've had previous constitutions, and then military people will step in and all of that. So if it is not completely broken, why do you want to, fix it as if it is completely broken? And so the gradualist approach for me grants us the benefit of caution, the benefit of, not rushing ourselves into something else. And then after a year or two of implementing that new constitution, we say, oh, amendments are needed and all of that. We can never have a perfect document, I believe. And no country would say it has a perfect constitution. And so I think perfecting it on a gradual basis for me is quite critical.
Sule, the gradualist approach, for example, the CRC brought up 41 entrenched provisions that needed to be amended. If you have to go to a referendum, you probably can only take one provision to that referendum, maybe one provision. So, and if you have to do tie the referendum with an election, that would mean how many years before you would have amended maybe 10 provisions that are entrenched. And the portions that are vexed, requiring some violent amendments, are all entrenched. The provisions on the presidency, the provisions on the judiciary, the provisions on all of them entrenched. And you know the entrenched provision, how the amendment process has to be gone into. It is a long process. The referendum must have at least 40% of the persons who are entitled to vote voting at the referendum, and at least 75% of the persons who voted voting in favor of a particular question. That's not easy to get. 75%.
Yes, not at all, Samson. And of course, as I said, I am for the gradualist approach, despite the points you've raised. The fact that we are still at it, despite the 2011 process, the Chairman's process, and now a new one being set up, means that it is, simply not an easy thing to do. And also the fact that even at the end of it, even if the experts and all have settled on certain provisions that require amendment, and those that are entrenched requiring that we put it to vote and let the masses determine, means that it is not something that we can simply say, oh, we think this is bad, and therefore let's go with it. The people have to speak about it. The people have to make their voices heard about it and their opinions known about it.
Okay.
And let's not also act as if, look, the thing is completely broken. We are in a crisis. We are in a mess. We've been at this for the last 31, 32, 33 years.
And what has the result been? You have been complaining and lamenting about the results.
Samson, it is true. And I don't think that if we were to amend or even overhaul the Constitution and have a new Constitution today, and we all agree this is the best form of Constitution, that is automatically going to transform our country into, whatever we all want it to be.
Okay.
I think it comes down to, yes, the Constitution matters, the laws matter, but we, the human beings, and how we operationalize them also matter a lot. And that, for me, so quite critical.
All right, thank you very much. Bashiratu, what do you have to say? And you sat in the Democracy Hub process as well, and you shared your views. But briefly, tell us, are you inspired by this particular committee led by Professor H. Kwesi Prempeh, and what are your expectations? Hello, Bashiratu. Okay. Hello, Bashiratu. If you can unmute your mic and proceed. Okay, let me go to Frank Davis. Hello, Frank.
Yes, Samson.
Right.
Thank you.
Right.
Well, yes, I've listened.
Thank you, Samson.
Okay, let's hear
Can
Frank.
you hear me?
Let's hear Frank. Frank, go ahead.
Yes, I've listened to the commentaries, and I think I want to place myself within the blend. Yes, let me start off with Oliver. I mean, Oliver, I can well imagine the zeal and the focus of this new constitution altogether. But Oliver, well, we cannot just overthrow the constitution unless we are in a military coup d'etat. So we just have to maybe we take it easy on that because Oliver, I'm happy you have said that you are your numbers are negligible. So I'll say you are a significant minority, but not an insignificant one. So
Micro minority.
Much as we want to tinker with the constitution, I think we will have to do it. To borrow the last speakers, we're in the gradualist approach. But let's see what it holds for us. We've had a constitution review commission in 2010. We've had a constitution review consultative committee in 2023, and now we have a constitution review committee in 2025
to look at the two works.
Yes. All these committees and the present one are being chaired by eminent Ghanaian citizens. I mean, we will have to give them their due. Professor H. Kwesi Prempeh has showed his mettle over the years. I mean, he, excuse my language, doesn't suffer fools gladly. He says this as it is. So, what is it that the 2010 Commission and the 2023 committee have done that we can piece together in all sincerity and make sure that we are able to evolve the Constitution 1992? You see, because it is not by word of say so. Our actions should envelope our deeds. The political will to carry out this exercise should be paramount. And in all sincerity, we should demonstrate our bona fides. If we are saying that it is being set up in good faith, let us demonstrate our bona fides and make sure that whatever recommendations are there, if we are able to tweak and come out with something just which is enviable to the generality of the public, fine. You see, because we all cannot run away from the inherent contradictions of the Constitution. I mean, just like Inusa said, how do you juxtapose Article 17 against Article 71? I mean, are you saying some public servants are more public servants than others? No. So if there is a criteria, I think that criteria should be holistic. But you don't set up one set of public officers or public servants, one rule for the other, and another. So there are so many other parts of the Constitution that we all disagree with. But my focus should be on what the president intends to do with this committee and what he believes can be done with the recommendations that they will put forward. They have 5 months to complete this work. And I must dare say that some of the persons mentioned on that committee are people of steel. These are people who say, as it is, I've had the enviable record of practicing in the Supreme Court. And I mean, Justice Sophia Adingra, you cannot go to the Supreme Court and pretend as if you are going to play before her. I mean, this was a stature on the bench. At any time lawyers went to the Supreme Court and they saw her on the bench of the Supreme Court, they knew they was trouble.
Blunt speaking.
So if we have, if we have such, of course, there's something you can bear me out, sir, to say. If we have such persons, Professor Kwame Karikari, I mean, these are people who have spoken their minds all over the years. I mean, we know what they have stood for and we know what they still stand for. All right? So I want to believe in the strength of character of these persons. Dr. Godwin Jokoto, I mean, fairly senior lawyer at the bar, and I mean, if you interact with him, it's his deep sense of reasoning and the way he articulates issues. And these are people who should be able to bring their experience to bear. But at the end of the day, what is it that we as a nation are looking for? See, we have to be bold enough to say that this in the Constitution we don't want, and this in the Constitution we will abide with.
Okay.
So I think the sincerity aspect is what should enable these persons to do their work to the best of their professional ability and be able to advise the president constructively, so that altogether we can have a document which ascribes to our aspirations and wishes here.
Right. Let me hear Bashira too. And there are people who point to AC Ansan, Dr. AC Ansan, and say she was the one who was bearing the placard that said the president is naked when during Occupy Flagstaff House, when they were we were demonstrating against the Mahama administration. There are some people who are not too excited. Why do you appoint, quote unquote, people who don't like you?
Well, I think what we should also be interrogating is whether AC Ansa doesn't like President Mahama, or it is about the state of the economy and from the perspective that she was coming from.
Right.
Because even looking at how we are all discussing these issues, we are all looking at things from a different lens of view. So the fact that, I mean, myself and Oliver have demonstrated a lot as part of Fix the Country, I'll be part of Brother Chamber and all of that. Does that mean when my expertise are needed, I should be considered based on my activism, or it should purely be about national interest where my expertise is what is needed and not about my activism and how I have fiercely, spoken out about certain things. And whatever applies to AC Ansa applies to every member of the committee, like Prof. I mean, we've all seen how Prof has been really critical on social media about his comments and other things.
Like so some say like father, like daughter.
Of course, I mean, and that's a normal thing to see around, So Dr. AC Ansa's membership, what is supposed to even tell us our earlier discussion about the type of appointment President Mahama has made, whether it is about affiliation, it is about national interest, it is about competence. And that is the lens I think we should all be using to look out for in all of the appointments and what our expectations are. Otherwise, if we limit it to political party affiliation and other things, we may, I'm just using may loosely, not get what we really seek to get. And let's not also forget something, that this is President Mohammed's second coming. He's been there before. He has seen what we all have probably not seen. He possibly also wants to avoid certain things and leave a legacy before exiting, finally. So we should trust the process. What Ghanaians should do now is to commit to supporting in whatever way we can to make this process work. And if we truly believe in what we have all been clamoring for, which is an inclusive government instead of the winner takes all, this is what we should be doing and looking out. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you also very much, our guests and our viewers as well. This has been Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And when we say that, I know you understand that's exactly what we mean. Inusa Hussaini, former MP, Tamale Central, former ranking member, Constitutional, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs Committee of Parliament. Oliver Bakavomawo, Constitutional Rights and Policy Strategy Advisor, Democracy Hub. Frank Davis is Chairman, Constitutional and Legal Committee, New Patriotic Party. Suleiman Ibrahima is Executive Director, Media Foundation for West Africa. Bashiratu Kamal is Fellow, Center for Social Justice. We were also joined by George Sapong. The expertise that he carries is huge. He is the head of the Executive Secretary of the National Media Commission. Newsfile, as always, is brought to you by Bank of Africa, strong as a group and close as a partner. Close as a partner, MTN everywhere you go. And very many Ashesi University educating article and entrepreneur leaders for Africa. And then we also have Robert and Sons Optical Services. They have been doing this for over 31 years consistently. Also, DBS Industries, roofing, Papa,